as cancer, right? We have the technology to do this. So Israel could do it this secretly, and no one would talk about it. And in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, the population of Gaza would all be gone. It would be a very secret, right? Instead, they choose to do this in front of the world. And my argument to you is that this is intentional. They want the world to hate them. Because by doing this, they create the ultimate taboo, right? We find this disgusting and contemptuous, so the entire world will unite against Israel. But guess what? That's what their religion wants. In the extreme form of Jewish eschatology, or the religion, they believe that at the end of the world, Israel will fight the entire world, and God will help Israel triumph in the end. So what's really happening in Gaza is that there are extremists within the Israel government who want to accelerate the process of the end of the world, where Israel will face the world. And if you think about it, the entire idea of this ritual sacrifice is to unite the Israeli population. And what's extremely disturbing and horrifying about it is that this works. Why? Well, let's use an analogy, okay? The analogy is this. In Chinese history, the most popular military stratagem is to fight with a river behind your back. You guys have heard of this strategy, right? Where, okay, an army is losing, okay? It's being scattered by the enemy. So what the general does is forces the army to retreat to a river. And now with a river blocking your escape, you have a choice. You can either drown in the river, or you can fight to the death. And most soldiers will choose to fight to the death. And so at this point, the soldiers are unified, they're galvanized, they're energized, and then they find a surge of energy to go and destroy their enemy. Okay, this is the most popular military stratagem in ancient Chinese history, and guess what? It's the same as Israel doing this right now in Gaza. It's the same logic.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to our 24th episode of Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. Today we're going to discuss a variety of topics, mostly focusing on Israel. We'll examine why Israel's strongest ally, the US, probably is no longer a guaranteed partner. We're going to check the recent UN Commission's conclusion, which is Israel found responsible for genocide in Gaza, which is a historic blow to Tel Aviv's global legitimacy. And we will also see why the US vetoed yet another UN resolution and blocked the Security Council draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. We will check two articles in The Economics. Basically, they are discussing that even in Israel's most powerful ally, public support is souring. What does this mean for the future of US-Israel relations? Dear friend Tarik, how are you doing today?
Fine, how are you, Kevork?
I'm very good. Actually, I wanted to play this video at the beginning of Chinese professor Chiang Quikin, who I recently discovered, and he posts lengthy solo videos and lectures on YouTube. I recommend everyone to go and check him. And I think he's posting fascinating analysis about geopolitics, geoeconomics, and also some predictions about future. If you like to predict the future, how it's going to be, it's dark, the disclaimer. But on this channel, let's focus on probably some bright news, and that is that the Israelis are losing support in the US itself. But before that, one of the major news in this during this week was there is a clear conclusion by a UN commission, which says that the Israelis actually are committing genocide, and this has come on September 16th. The UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry released a report on the situation in Gaza. The commission found Israel responsible for committing genocide under the 4 of the 5 elements of the 1948 Genocide Convention in the Gaza Strip. The findings include that Israel has committed acts including killing, inflicting serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting living conditions calculated to bring about physical destruction, and imposing measures intended to prevent birth. The report states there is circumstantial evidence of genocidal intent, and that, given the totality of the evidence, genocidal intent is the only reasonable inference. They're holding accountable the Israeli political and military leadership, specifically President Isaac Herzog, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And most importantly, I have found out this that this commission, they emphasized how they have mentioned something called dolus specialis, and this is which in the article which I'm going to show now, they say that this is a rare and serious, that the UN Commission attributing genocide intent as dolus specialis, and in previous reports they haven't done that. I think Tarik, if I want to start with you this conversation, if a UN commission has now formally accused Israel of genocide in Gaza, but major Western powers, I mean, the US yesterday used another veto, and additionally, they continue to arm and shield Israel diplomatically. I mean, don't you think this exposes the limits of international law, rules-based international order? But most importantly, is reform possible? This is the most important thing. Everybody's talking about reforming the UN, reforming international law. Is reform possible without a clash, which could recalibrate the balance of power to begin with?
Yeah. You know, look, maybe one thing I should say at the beginning, right? Because it's an important detail, it seems to me. It's true. This commission, these three experts, very high-ranking, extremely professional, real authorities, obviously in their field, they have made the point that there is not only circumstantial evidence for an Israeli intention, deliberate intention to commit a genocide. They have made the point that this is the only inference that can be drawn from this evidence. There are two things to say about this. One, this is important from a purely legal, almost technical perspective, because there is a judgment from, I think, 2015 or 16, which still had to do with, as far as I remember, no, it's an earlier judgment, but forget the year. But it was a judgment that had to do with the wars in the former Yugoslavia. And in this judgment, the court had argued, there was a dissenting opinion. I think the dissenter was right. But the court as a whole had argued that to infer the intention to commit genocide, you have to be able to show that it's the only possible inference, the only possible explanation of the evidence. So not one of three plausible explanations, and maybe even the best, but the only possible one. This is an incredibly high standard of proof, and I think it's an absurdly high one that should never have been adopted, right? But I think when they make this point in this UN Commission report now, that this is the only possible inference, it's directly aiming at that threshold. So they're reacting to this precedent, and they're, as it were, in advance, taking care of it and saying, you know what? Yes, it is the only one, right? Forget the shilly-shally. Yeah. But the other thing that one also has to add is that they're not saying that the intention to commit a genocide on the Israeli side can only be inferred. We all know that the other thing here is that the Israelis actually have been the most outspoken, self-incriminating genociders ever in modern history. Yes. And I mean this literally. There is no other genocide in modern history where you will find the perpetrators constantly admitting their crime loudly to the global public. Only the Israelis have done this. So, as many other experts have pointed out long before, proving intent, which is crucial for the crime of genocide, will not be hard. Usually it's very hard. But in this case, the Israelis have given us all the proofs we want. They've admitted it constantly.
Right? Are they doing it deliberately, as I shown in the video at the beginning?
Let's see, yeah. So those are the two things I think one should say about this particular very tricky point in the report, which I think they've handled very well. The other thing that you have asked about is reform of the UN, of our whole international system as it officially exists but doesn't really function possible, right? I think the key is what you said then, which is it possible without a clash? And there I would agree with, I think, what you're implying, that it may be possible, but only with large-scale conflict of one sort or another. I'm not talking about World War III. It could be a conflict that is largely political. It could be a conflict that involves armies somewhere. But I don't think that the current system as it is working now, this very corrupted UN, unfortunately, it's extremely corrupted, is reformable without major crises. Without major crises, it's not. So people who have this romanticized idea of reform, right? There are some people in the 90s, this was very fashionable. Reform was supposed to be good because it was always soft and nice. Everybody likes reform because it's not violent like a revolution, right? If that's your idea of reform, I think you can forget about it.
Yeah,
it may be reformable, but only with some major clashes on the way, if at all, right? To make it a bit more concrete, how would you, for instance, resolve the issue that the UN as a whole has a very undemocratic structure? There is a General Assembly, which is, so to speak, the general element, the Parliament of Nations. But when they designed the UN, they made sure that the Parliament of Nations could do almost nothing. Almost nothing, right? Whereas the real power is concentrated in the Security Council. And the Security Council is not a parliament of nations. It's a very, very restrictive club of the most powerful and rich ones. Which, you know, they've made certain concessions, but that's still its basic structure. Moreover, every single permanent member of this super restrictive club can block everybody else. Right? There's a single veto thing built into this.
That happened yesterday.
So the UN, as it is now, is a fundamentally extremely unequal, undemocratic institution. Surprise, surprise. I understand that our audience will not be surprised, but let's summarize it, right? And it has been talked, we have had talk of reform for decades, at least for 2 decades. No kidding. I mean, you have a literature on the talks about the reforms that's been going on only in the last 2 to 3 decades. And it has gone absolutely nowhere. And the reason is that much of this talk of reform is handled as if we were talking about an algorithm or redesigning a house, as if it's a technical problem. It's not a technical problem. It's a political problem. It's about raw power. And the people who have most power in the UN now don't want it to be reformed, right?
Yes.
And when you face a situation like that, you can philosophize, you can think about all sorts of schemes. It will never work because they won't let you, right? Too much is at stake. So once again, I'm circling back to what you implied, I think, which is if it can be changed for the better, then only by way of some sort of very severe conflict.
Indeed. I also agree with you. I don't think there was any historical conjuncture or an event, let's say a change in the international system without certain upheaval. Unfortunately speaking, this is also going to be the case sooner or later. Before we continue this discussion, I want to say first, I totally apologize for not welcoming everyone, those who are watching us on YouTube, on Rumble and Ganjin World. And everybody is welcomed here, guys. Your opinions are all equally important as long as we are respectful to each other and we're not engaging into trolling, including the Zionists who come now and they want to counter our arguments. And one of which Tarik says, Ukraine, 2 million casualties, Gaza less than 60,000. How is it a genocide in Gaza and not in Ukraine? I think the floor is yours.
Oh, I mean, this is shooting tuna in the can, Barak. I'm sorry, whoever you are, Barak, whatever terminal of the IDF you're sitting, Info Warrior, I'm sure that's what you are. And I don't think your rank is very high because this is really, really primitive. So look, you should have been told by someone, by your superiors, presumably, the people who trained you up to do this, right? That genocide is not defined by numbers.
Yes.
It's not. Genocide is defined. Please read the Genocide Convention of 1948. I'm sure you can get translation into modern Hebrew if that's what it takes in your case. I don't know. Maybe it's forbidden in Israel. It looks like it is. So what it makes clear to you very quickly, and you don't need the rest of the literature, what it makes clear to you very quickly, genocide as a crime is not by the numbers.
Yes.
You can kill a very small number of people and still be guilty of genocide. The important criterion, the key criteria are two. You have to do it deliberately, and luckily maybe the wrong word. Unfortunately for Israelis have let us know that they're doing this on purpose, deliberately, right? So we can prove this, don't you worry. And the second criterion is you have to do it because of their belonging to a group with the intention to destroy that group in whole. And now it comes. This is the point that shocks everybody. In part. In part. So I have to tell you, Barak, if you think that Israel will only have committed genocide once it has killed the very last Palestinian, you're wrong. You're wrong. The people who drew up the Genocide Convention weren't total idiots. They were not. And so they realized that the genocide can happen in part. Killing a certain number is enough, even if there are survivors. And so let me explain to you something, Barak. The reason that the International Court of Justice is on its way. They're not quite there, but that's because they always take long. Don't you have any hopes? It's on its way to find officially that Israel has been committing genocide. The reason this commission has said it, the reason the single largest association of genocide and Holocaust scholars in the world has now said it, and I could go on and on and on, is that it's a very clear-cut case. So that much for Israel. It's not about numbers. Now, talking about Ukraine, right? And you mean here the war between Russia on one side and de facto Ukraine and its Western supporters on the other side. It's not a numbers game. So your 2 million, they don't really mean anything in this context. The question is, first of all, is that number correct? Unfortunately, probably more than 1 million people have been killed, but most of them, the preponderant majority, combatant soldiers in armed conflict. Now, I understand, I don't know if you're Israeli yourself, but I understand that Israelis find it completely impossible by now to understand the difference between shooting at another grown person who has a gun to shoot back and shooting a child in the head. I understand. Israelis don't understand this anymore. But the rest of us, we do understand the difference.
And we're watching.
War is terrible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a pacifist. I served in an army once, but war is terrible. I'm not for war. I think war is a horrific breakdown of human intelligence. But genocide is much, much worse again. War is unfortunately what humans at this stage of the development will do. I hope we get out of this at one point. Genocide is a perversion that nobody should be allowed to get away with. And I'm sure Israel will not be allowed to get away with in the end. No illusions there, please. They'll come for you. You get justice if that's where you are. So here's the point. What is happening between Russia and Ukraine is a war, very clearly. The whole blah, blah about genocide, which, by the way, both sides have raised occasionally. And in both sides, I have contradicted very consistently. There is no genocide there. There is a war, actually, but there is no genocide. And when you try to pretend that that is a genocide, the war between Russia and Ukraine, you are trying to dilute the idea of genocide. You are trying to pretend that every war is a genocide. And I've had it with these damn stupid mind games. That is not a genocide. What Israel is doing to the Palestinians is not a war. It has never been a war. It's a massacre and it's a genocide.
You know why I brought this comment, Tarik? Because I know for sure
give me
that
a heart attack.
many Israelis are living in a bubble, and they don't know what is behind this bubble and how the people perceive them nowadays, and why they are receiving backlash when they go on tourism in different places around the world and they cry about anti-Semitism. But this has nothing to do.
They can come here. I can give them more. I can help them getting out of the bubble. I help. But let me tell them one thing. If we have Israeli listeners from inside the bubble now, your bubble is no excuse. As you may have told by my accent, I'm German. The bubble the Nazis were in was no excuse. Forget it.
I hope this answer was clear. not only for this person and for everyone. This was a comprehensive definition on what genocide is, the motives behind it, the intent, and how we could define the act of genocide in this case. And Red Access, thank you so much, brother, for moderating the live chat today as usual. I'm very grateful for creating this environment in the live chat for everyone to participate in the discussion, even if this person is a Zionist like Barak, who came recently. Now, we are speaking about Israel, Zionism, the intent to commit genocide, and one of the backlashes they receive is in the United States, and the US is the strategic ally. I don't know if I can call this relationship an alliance, but this is how they describe it, right? Today you sent me an article, and the first article is how Israel is losing America. And this article argues that the US support for Israel, once broadly bipartisan and robust, is eroding. Various stands in American public opinion, institutional leadership, and political culture are expressing growing discomfort, criticism, or outright opposition to Israel's war in Gaza and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's policies. Key factors undermining Israel's position in America include the scale of civilian casualties, concerns about misuse of US taxpayer money, and the perception that Israel is dragging the US into prolonged conflict with diminishing strategic returns. I think the question here should be if Israel is increasingly seen in Washington as a burden, I mean, at least among the Americans, morally, financially, and diplomatically, could the US establishment eventually recalibrate its Middle East strategy away from unconditional support, or is this just a temporary dip in public sentiment that elites will eventually ignore?
Look, I mean, as you know, and probably some of the audience know, because I sometimes mention it, by training, I'm a historian, right? Not of the ancient world, but very much of the modern world, but a historian. And as a historian, my first response would be, the United States has a certain past, right? And it's much longer, that past of the United States, whatever else you think about it, right? The past of the United States is much longer than this type of relationship with Israel. Much longer, right?
Yes.
This type of, you're right, it's not an ordinary alliance. It's really something else. It's a very pathological symbiosis or something by now, right? There is no real word for it in politics. This type of relationship has only existed, arguably, I would say, since the 1970s, actually, not even the 60s. A lot of people would say Six-Day War, 67. I think it took even a little longer to get as pathological as it is now. And it's getting worse over time, right? I mean, Biden, the predecessor of the current president, has certainly marked a total low point, right? Because he has joined Israel. He has really joined it as a co-perpetrator in a genocide. And he has made the US join Israel as a co-perpetrator in a genocide. Not that there haven't been other earlier astonishing instances where the US government has shown their extreme submissiveness. For instance, when the Israelis bombed an American ship of war, the USS Liberty, and actually killed quite a lot of the soldiers, and everything was hushed up because, hey, Israelis, right? Every other country would have been bombed to smithereens by the US in return. I can assure you that, but not the Israelis. And that's only one of the most famous incidents. We also, of course, have everything that we, I think, plausibly have to suspect about the intelligence connections of Jeffrey Epstein, and so on and so on. Let's not get into the details. It's not a conspiracy theory. The relationship between Israel and the US is extremely toxic and extremely pathological. It's very bad for the world. It's horrifically bad for the Palestinians and the Middle East or Western Asia, but it's bad for all of us. It's also very bad, actually, for the US and ordinary Americans. Now, since it's, however, something that has existed for about, say, half a century, that's long. It's far too long, but not for all of US history, right? It's also something that can go away again. And I think it will in the end. I think this perverse relationship between Israel and this really insane amount of leverage that this very small state has over the US will at some point be broken. It will end. It will be too late for many, many victims of Israel. That's the tragedy here. that Israel will have been able to commit so many horrific crimes backed up by the US to the hilt before it will end. But it will end. Now, to these articles that you've mentioned, I mean, my impression from them was, first of all, let's mention once again, you did it before, but these came out in The Economist. And if you know The Economist, you know it's not only a party paper of neoliberalism, right?
Yes.
Up at the top there. It's also a party paper of Zionism. It's extremely pro-Israel, pro-American, all at the same time. So these articles, you read them against the grain, right? It's like when you lived in the Soviet Union, you read about the war in Afghanistan, you would read against the grain, right?
Yes.
So here too, what The Economist is doing, they're wailing, they're whining, they're lamenting. Oh my God, the relationship between Israel and the USA is on the rocks.
Yes.
And while they're crying, I'm laughing, obviously, as so many other people will be, because that's hope. That's great hope. Now, let's not exaggerate the hope at the same time, because what they're showing is that Israel has probably never had as little popular backing for the last 25 years. That's something. They're also showing their serious trajectories pointing away from support for Israel. There's still a difference, age-wise, political orientation, party orientation. All of these things matter, evangelical or not evangelical. But what they show you is that in all of these different sectors, right, of the American political not establishment of American society, really, you see Israeli or support for Israel clearly, very clearly eroding. You now have, I give you one figure only, 43% of Americans saying that Israel is committing a genocide.
Yes.
Now be very careful. You may be sitting there and saying 43%, that's not enough. It should be 100. And I agree with you. It should be 100. But within the United States, this is sensational, and for two reasons. First of all, 43% of Americans not only saying, I don't like Israel, or I have concerns about Israel, but actually saying Israel is committing genocide, the worst crime in the world. 43% doing that, that's big. And the other thing is, they're saying it to a pollster. That's why we have the number. 43, don't underestimate how important this is. 43% of Americans, or a representative sample to be precise, are now ready to say to a pollster, yeah, I think Israel is committing genocide. That's a big one. That's very big. You have, when you look at evangelicals, and many of you will be aware that evangelicals are a very specific group because many of them are Zionists. They're so-called Christian Zionists, right?
Vast majority,
so they have built up a very perverse ideology that makes them, as fervent Christians, support Israeli crimes. That's how I have to put it, right? But when you look at evangelicals under 30, the dynamic is breathtaking. Look up the article, the figures. I won't give them to you here. It's something with 60 and 30, and so not important. Under 30, you have a massive erosion of support for Israel among evangelicals. So think about it, right? Charlie Kirk has just been murdered, assassinated, right? And unlike many others, I won't say anything mean about him, but I don't know why. But it is a fact, whoever did this or whoever was behind it in the end, that Kirk was on the verge of becoming much more independent of Zionist sponsors than he had been before. Kirk had been very pro-Israel, criminally pro-Israel in my book, and he was about to free himself. Now, Kirk was a major leader with who? Christian conservative young people. If you look at it, exactly, if you look at it from the Mossad headquarters, you look at the American left, and you will say the American left is lost to us.
Are you reading my mind?
The American left, right? Also, we control the American left. We, the Mossad, fight the American left through the American
100%.
police. We have no issue there, right?
100%.
But if somebody would start mobilizing young Christian conservative Americans against Israel, that's a danger. That's a real danger. And although he has been murdered in one way or the other, of course, he stood for a tendency. There are others like him. So again, I won't go through all the details, but I think The Economist factually has a very strong point. Factually, ideologically, they are gaga, as always. But factually, they have a strong point, which is the support for Israel in the US is massively eroding. And when you read the rest of the article, it also says one other thing, which I've been saying forever, which is if Israel loses America, they don't quite use these words, but that's what they're saying. It's done. It's done. The relationship with Israel, with America, is completely vital for Israel. It cannot survive in the long term without this perverse relationship. Everything is at stake here.
And how many statements Netanyahu posted in the past days telling the people we're not behind the assassination, which makes things look more suspicious, you know. Tarik, you just read my mind while you were talking. Before you brought the issue of Charlie Kirk, I wanted to ask you this question. I wanted to say, Tarik, you're a left wing, you're a lefty, but we expect from the left to push against Israel naturally, right, ideologically. But the right in the United States is so hijacked by the Christian Zionists and the Israeli Zionists to the extent that any shift in this narrative among the younger people in this, let's say, conservative Christian people below 30 years old, which Charlie Kirk was talking to all the time, this is an extremely dangerous thing for them. So I'm not saying Israel assassinated it, but it's really plausible. It's really plausible that they have a motive behind it.
One more thing, if I may, that's because it just occurs to me, and it's not just the young. I mean, you have people like Steve Bannon. I mean, Steve Bannon is a monster in my view, but Bannon too. It's not consistent, but Bannon as well. Hyper-Christian, hyper-conservative, has shown clear signs of distancing from Israel recently. If they're honest, I don't know. You have it with Tucker Carlson, where I actually think it's honest, and you have it with Marjorie Taylor Greene. So for Israel, there is a real danger of a right-wing resistance to Zionism and Zionist subversion of the United States gelling. And I'm here for it. I'm a lefty, but I'm here for it.
I know, you know, the person who will dig in the most in this case when it comes to Charlie Kirk is Candace Owens. If Candace Owens, you don't want her as an enemy on your side.
I think Netanyahu is going to have to sort of talk to the Macrons about that one, you know, the Candace Owens Pain Association or something.
I expect more violence in the US from now on. Things will boil, and I think they are one assassination away from a social clash in the US itself. And this time, they really don't want for the right wing to carry arms. And those are the ones who have the guns, right? But if Israel wants to create a blackmail situation in the US, they would go after another assassination to urge the conservative right-wingers to shoot back this time.
Can I say one more thing? Because you mentioned blackmail, and it really made me think about something that I think we should also bring up, which is, I don't think that this loss of America for Israel is going to happen tomorrow. They have control over the Trump administration, at least as well as over the Biden administration. I make no mistake. It's incredible how Trump obeys Israel. Marco Rubio, Huckabee, we're going to see him maybe, and so on. I mean, it's horrific. And we have good reason to think that Trump as well is in some dependency. Let me put it very, very mildly. But think about it structurally. I wonder about one thing. One thing that Epstein has done as a case, even if they can shut it down more or less, he has provided a very deterring example of how not to be captured by the friends over there in the Middle East, right? And there could very well be a way in which the Israelis have gone too far, in that there will soon be a generation of American leaders who will do all sorts of terrible things, as they always do, but they won't do one thing: create a situation in which they can be blackmailed by the Israelis. They may have gone so far that finally the younger ones in the American establishment, on whom they don't have compromise material yet, will finally stay away from it. And that too would be, within the next 10, 20, 30 years, a terrible strike against de facto Israeli power.
Indeed. I want to mention something for everyone watching. Even if you agree with Israel, even if you accept everything Israel is doing nowadays, and you're influential, you're on X, you're on YouTube, you have some influence over public opinion, you are from the left, you are a black person, you know, they're trying to find some even minority people, let's say. Don't get money from Israel. That is your death sentence. I'm not saying physically, and this is going to lead into a blackmail after. Once you're part of it, you cannot be unpart of it. You cannot really exit that route. Once you go into it, you cannot leave it voluntarily. I'm telling you this. If you agree with even if you agree with Israel, do not take money from them. This will turn against you, and there are people who do it. It's okay, but this is just a humble advice. And after the regime change in Syria, I was approached by an Israeli person who was trying to communicate with me several times, which I haven't responded to his comments. And then he became a patron. So he paid $5 per month so that he can send me a direct message on Patreon. So what they're doing is they're recruiting people everywhere. And if you see the message, and they're very clear that we will support you, we will make you big, we will assist you with whatever you want, technically, financially, and everything. And they have a big PR team. They could push your content. All they want is, let's create an alliance of minorities, between quotation, in Syria, who are pro-Israel. I'm out of that. I don't play these games. I don't put my hands in the hand of the Israelis. I don't take money from them or from anyone else for this. So this is really important, guys. They do these things all the time. Influencers on X, those who go on trips to Israel to say, we haven't seen any genocide here. Look at all this food standing on the borders in Gaza, but which will never go into Gaza. It's like these people are like Goebbels, you know, they're going there and they're doing a horrible, horrible job. And I think if you believe in God, that is going to be really bad on the day of judgment. So be careful of that. And another announcement, my friends, as you know, every week we do this show. It's called Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend Tarik. We do it at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. And almost every week, our dear friend does a special offer. If you subscribe to Tarik's Substack today and tomorrow, you will get 20% off on new annual subscriptions. The link is scrolling on the screen. And the link is also in the description below. You can just click it and become the subscriber of Tarik's work, which is extremely important to support also independent thinkers and intellectuals. Tarik, I'm going to show you a video, which I'm sure you have seen it anyways, but the level of the cringe in this video is too much for me even to handle. This is U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. He says Jews are God's chosen people, and we're going to watch this with an open mind. We are not here to discuss biblical things. We're not here to criticize religions or Semitic people or anything, but there is an ideology involved. There is an ideology involved in this, and this is very, very clear. So let's watch it.
What an honor to be here for this incredible ceremony. Mr. Prime Minister, Secretary Rubio, all of the wonderful people who made this possible by their generosity, contributing to something that is historic and something that is a living memorial of what God has done. It was 4,000 years ago here in this city on Mount Moriah where God chose his people. He not only chose a people, but he chose a place. And then he chose for the people in this place a purpose. The people were the Jewish people. The place was Israel. And the purpose was to be a light to the world and to show that we don't have to look for God because he is looking for us. And that is what so separates the long history of why this city is so important. Those of us who are not Jewish, we thank you for giving all of us a foundation of morality and decency and civilization upon which our own faith is built, for without yours, we don't have one. As I often tell my Jewish friends, you can be Jewish, you don't need me. But I cannot be who I am in my faith without the debt of obligation that I owe to you for having listened to God and been willing to be obedient to him when he called you to this place as his people for his eternal, everlasting purpose. And I salute you and join you tonight in the celebration of this wonderful, magnificent, incredible reminder that God never has been finished with Israel, and he never will be. This is the eternal home that he has chosen. God bless you all.
Do we have to comment on this, or do we have to silently talk about this?
Well, once we've heard it, right? I mean, what can we do? There's so much that is completely wrong here, right? Everything. It's hard. Look, obviously, the idea that they're literally I'm not actually an atheist. I was actually raised within one of the major traditions of Christianity, right? And as many people, I may be a little bit lapsed, but I'm not an atheist. I have sort of an inside view of religion, as it were, and I'm not an enemy of religion at all. I think it's a very human thing. But I have to say, to actually speak about God who made everything, because this is after all the image of God here, right? It's a God who made the universe, right? If you follow Christian or Jewish logic, they both admit that God made everything and the whole world, and he's out of time, and the categories of time and space don't really apply to him. It's a completely superior being, right? But he waited billions of years after he made the universe, and then he chose one tiny people. He made all of humanity. That's the origin myth of both Christianity and Judaism. Admit that God somehow made everyone, right? That all of us are children of God, every single one, everywhere. But he chose one. He chose only one tiny minority, right? Look, if somebody wants to believe in a very abstract sense that is a thing, that's religion. I have to tolerate that, right? And I will. But if somebody wants to literalize this, if somebody literally wants to say, this is the chosen people, here, these, he also says everybody else is not chosen. He chose them, not you, right? That's an insane idea. It's neither consistent with all sorts of other assumptions inherent in Christianity, and even to an extent in Judaism, although they don't reconcile it. It makes no sense at all, and it's actually a form of racism. It's a weirdly religiously coded racism, right? And this comes from, as far as I know, Huckabee is a fundamentalist Christian, as far as I know, right? He's not Jewish himself, he's a fundamentalist Christian, which also explains why he then basically slides on his knees before his Israeli audience and says, you can do without me, but I cannot do without you. Which is a ridiculous position, obviously. Religions are in themselves systems of tradition, and the fact that Christianity has integrated Jewish tradition to an extent doesn't mean they can't do without Jewish tradition. That was a decision. It was made in early Christianity. It's a historical decision. To be very honest, I sometimes feel I would have been with the heretics in the 5th century, and I would have said, you know what, let's shut the Old Testament. Because most of the Old Testament, I'm very sorry to tell you, I've read the whole thing, obviously, as you know, I'm a historian, I read stuff. Most of the Old Testament is an insane tale of brutality and ethnic cleansing. It's very ethnocentric. It's a nationalist tale about one people having the right to destroy everybody around them because their God loves them more than the others. When the Israelis started this particular genocide, they quoted from the Old Testament. Everybody knows this. Netanyahu came out there and said, we need to treat them like Amalek.
Amalek, yes.
Amalek is code, because everybody knows, who knows the Old Testament, Amalek was an ethnic group that was destroyed in its entirety. Everybody, very explicitly, including their pets and their domestic animals, by the Old Testament Jews, says the Old Testament. We don't need to believe this as history, but obviously Netanyahu does believe it. And not only does he believe it, he thinks it's a good thing. For him, what we call the Old Testament, and of course what you may call the Hebrew Bible, if you wish, is justifying genocide. Literally, he's told us this openly. And against this background, this fundamentalist Christian Huckabee says, you are the morality of the world. Everything that is moral comes from you. As if the Greeks had no morality, the Egyptians had no morality, the Chinese couldn't develop any morality. Oh, I'm tempted to say Christ, but then we are in religion again. But it's insane. It's completely insane. And the last thing I would like to mention about this is, it's not only that Huckabee is clearly deranged and a religious fanatic of the worst sort, right, and a supremacist. He is singing an ode to Jewish supremacism. He's saying, you are the best. You're the cornerstone of everything. God loves you most. Insane supremacism, literally, right? No, it's also that Huckabee is the ambassador. So that, again, it's not a surprise, but future historians will look back on this and say, well, that tells you something about what the US was at this point. That's the person they found and sent, right? We are in a very dark place.
I think so. Today I was watching a video for Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro, he literally mentioned your argument. To back up his basically, he says that just let me find you this video, because he says the death of the 15 million Jewish people is more important than the deaths of the 15 million Christian people. So he was justifying that. I really tried to find this video because
what he's trying to say, frankly.
But what he's trying to say is that basically the foundation of morality and their presence is more important than the Christians, because they are the one who give the source for this morality to the world. And I mean, from the same angle he's coming, and he was sitting in front of a very Christian commentator, who has not said anything about it. But this is happening now, and we receive lots of
Let me put it like this. In the context of Israel, and in the context of Zionism, I'm not generalizing here, but to me it is shocking to see that, I would say, those who take Judaism, that's not everyone, but those who take Judaism in an extremely fanatical and bigoted direction, as you can do with most religions, you can abuse them in this way, right? But what is special about Judaism right now in history is that those who do this, like Ben Shapiro here, do not find resistance. If you do this from a Muslim angle, which isn't my angle, I was actually raised as a Roman Catholic, by the way, but if you do it from a Muslim angle, you will get a lot of resistance. If you come from a Muslim angle and say, we are the best, only the Quran, people will argue with you, at least, if not worse. If you do it from a Christian angle alone, they would usually argue with you, and you deserve it. But you do it from a Jewish angle, from a perverted Jewish angle. Obviously, there is a better Judaism, yes. But if you do it from a perverted Jewish angle, people will be quiet. People like Huckabee will even sort of pay obeisance to you. That is a perverse situation. Every form of supremacism, fanaticism, and bigotry should be challenged by anybody. It doesn't matter.
But this type of submission, Tarik, to the Zionism, in this case, from these American officials, provoking the American right too far nowadays, that it is creating anti-Semitism. And we spoke about Charlie Kirk today. I just wanted to share this photo. So apparently, Ben Shapiro and his Daily Wire crew, they have taken over the show of Charlie Kirk in a quote-unquote show of solidarity with him. And they have added this photo of Jacob in the photo. They say, if I don't steal, they show somebody else will. This is so. When I saw this photo,
whatever. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I will come back to you in a more cringe video, because this time Friedrich Merz, he nearly burst into tears as he spoke of the shame he feels about the resurgence of anti-Semitism in Germany.
Liebe Frau Salamander, Sie sind aufgewachsen als Tochter von Überlebenden der Shoah in einem, Sie haben es gerade in Ihrer Rede schon gesagt, Displaced Persons Camp bei München. Und Sie haben in einem Ihrer Bücher geschrieben, dass Sie als Kind immer wieder diese eine Frage stellten, ob denn den Juden niemand geholfen habe. Ohne ein Festhalten an der Hoffnung auf eine positive Antwort, so schreiben Sie weiter, ohne ein Festhalten an der naiven Hilfserwartung des Kindes, wären wir doch als Menschen verloren. Auch heute.
It's unerträglich. I have to say as a German, it's unbearable. The hypocrisy is just through the roof.
But the serious question, Tarik, is in your observation, like anti-Semitic sentiments are on a big surge in Germany. Like, are we witnessing systematic surge, let's say, hate crimes, violence against the Jewish people? What's happening in Germany?
Well, yeah, I'll say something about it, but let me say one thing first. Look, to be very clear here, you know, I've said this before, I think, on this show, but let me say it again. I am, among other things, a historian of the Holocaust. And the longest chapter in my first book is a very detailed analysis of how the Holocaust unfolded in one city. And believe me, it takes no punches. It pulls no punches. So I'm very aware of the extreme evil that the Holocaust was. And that's the reason, among other things, why I am taking a stand against the Gaza genocide. That's why, among other things, because I've studied genocide and I've understood that if you have to ever live through genocide as a bystander, at least say something. It's the least you can do, right? And many Germans have not understood that, I'm afraid. So Merz, of course, is disgusting here. I'll say it. He's disgusting here. Maybe he's going to send me the police for a little, home search, as he's done with somebody else, apparently. And I tell you why. Because he's mentioning children. Has Merz heard about the fact that a very large share of the people mass murdered by the Israelis now for almost 2 years, we are in month 23 of the Gaza genocide, are children and their mothers and their fathers? Has he heard that Gaza is the place with the most child amputees in the world now and has been for a while? This is, among other things, what's happening in Gaza is a huge massacre of children, and it's deliberate because you cannot by accident kill so many children. You've got to want it. And we also know that not all of them are bombed and die suffocating under the houses that the Israelis have bombed. No, many of them are shot in the head. You have to want to shoot someone in the head. You have to want to do that. And if you're a sniper and shooting someone in the head, snipers are a very special type of soldier. They see who they kill. This is not long-range artillery even, where you shoot something 10 miles away and then you don't know what happens. I mean, you know, but you don't see it. Snipers see who they kill. And if you get a lot of children with bullets in their head from snipers, you know they want to. And that has been happening in Gaza. And that is a fact. And this man, and I'm ashamed of him as a German, stands there and dares mention children in this absolutely hypocritical, disgusting manner. This moment will live in infamy. Germans will be ashamed of this moment. Anyhow, let me say something else. Anti-Semitism. Look, I don't know how much more actual anti-Semitic incidents there are in Germany, and I'll tell you why. One big problem is that by now, German authorities have started counting things that are criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism. So you give me a statistic and you say, oh, I see 15% more anti-Semitic incidents. And I will ask you, for every single case, what do you mean? Oh, this guy said Israel is committing a genocide. And I would have to say, I'm not an anti-Semite at all. And I'm saying it. So P off, F off, right? That's not anti-Semitism. That's a misapplication for political demagogic purposes, for repression purposes of the word anti-Semitism. And so we don't quite know. But what this obviously does, it actually destroys the concept, right? People who read what I've written over years as an academic will find that I've taken anti-Semitism always very seriously. And I can tell you one thing, the way it's now inflated, the way in which everyone who dares to protest against an Israeli genocide is called an anti-Semite, will produce a total destruction of the concept. People will laugh at it. Soon they will laugh at it. They will say, you call me an anti-Semite, I don't care. Because the word
but that's what's happening.
Yes, the word has lost its meaning, and it's losing its meaning, not because of the anti-Semites. They are not doing that. Let's be fair. It's losing its meaning because of people like Keir Starmer, or, for instance, the mayor of Berlin, Kai Wegner, who used the word anti-Semitism to repress resistance to genocide. That's why it will lose its meaning.
What is behind this? What does he want? Like, there is definitely a political agenda behind it. They want to push something on the people.
Yes,
right?
I mean, look, in part, this is code for an attack on migrants. This is very clear. Because the Germans, and especially conservative Germans, have this narrative now, which is that, you know what? The problem with anti-Semitism in Germany is not the Germans. I mean, perish the thought. It's not like they have a tradition or something, right? No, the real problem with the anti-Semitism in Germany is the migrants. They are bringing it in, right? So they're blaming migrants. And of course, they're implicitly blaming Muslim migrants, or migrants who at least have a Muslim background. And believe me, Germans, these types of Germans, I should say, make no distinction between, say, somebody who's from Syria and an Armenian, and somebody from Syria who is actually a Muslim. They don't know. They don't care, right? I mean, they hardly believe I'm a Catholic. Again and again, I get to hear from Germans on social media, oh, you're Muslim anyhow. Well, I wouldn't mind, but that's not what happened.
Yes.
So there is definitely an anti-migrant and an Islamophobic dog whistle, as the Americans say, in here as well.
I wanted to end this conversation with a more bright note.
Oh, you have a better one?
With a brighter note. But unfortunately, that is the case, and they're going to politicize this case, instrumentalize it, and they will push more measures on the people. They will silence speech. They will kick out people from their jobs, and lots of things going to happen. Unfortunately, it's already happening in the US. It's happening in exactly. Right? Lots of things going to happen, guys. So brace yourself. Dear Tarik, thank you so much for always your great contribution and insights for me and for the audience of Syriana Analysis. We appreciate you. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in today. As our moderator says, please like and share before leaving this show. The easy thing to do is to hit the thumbs up so that this show reaches to more people. And if you like to support the independent work we are doing here, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, and it's also in the description below. There are also other means to support the show in the description below, and we will see you next week. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and peace be upon you, dear friend Tarik. Salam.
Bye-bye.